a.m. in New York City, 10 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. Treasuries on the move after hotter than expected CPI data drives yields higher across major markets. PPI up next. Tech also bouncing, lifting stocks. SoftBank's AI bet paying off handsomely, and Anthropic chasing more funding. And President Trump heads to China, emphasizing the focus on trade talks with President Xi while renewing threats toward Iran. Well, it's been an interesting session in Asia on the tech front. Let's get a check on markets around the world now, starting with Winnie Su for the latest from Asia. Winnie.
Good morning, Bonnie. What a turnaround for Asian stocks today. Originally, we were expecting a down day with the U.S. CPI and that sell-off in chips overnight, but we quickly saw that reversal with that surprise of Jensen Huang joining the Trump-Xi meeting. And here you can see Kospi leading that rebound up 2.6%. Now, you flip the board and see how really all eyes are on that upcoming meeting between President Trump and Xi, with the Taiwanese TAIEX index actually under pressure because Taiwan is actually one of the big discussion topic, but you did see that the Chinese stocks and currencies actually extending gains, with the Chinex index surging to a record on these optimism around trade talks, especially U.S.'s chip exports.
All right, Winnie Su, thank you so much. Now, with the King's Speech on deck and Keir Starmer still in precarious position, let's get to London now and Justina Lee, London.
Good morning, Bonnie. Now, continuing with that bullish theme that Winnie was just talking about, we're seeing kind of European stocks up 0.6% today. And the euro is a bit weaker, with broader kind of dollar strength that we're seeing today. Now, of course, as you were saying, the focus is still on the UK today. Now, in terms of short-end gilt yields, we're seeing a bit of relief today with yields kind of down 3 basis points. And I think that's kind of reflecting kind of the oil also slipping a little bit. And so traders kind of paring back those rate hike bets. But of course, when it comes to political risk, we're all watching those long-end bond yields. Now, if we flip the board here, we can see that today the 30-year yields are seeing a bit of a relief too. But of course, the focus is still on the future of Keir Starmer, Bonnie. Yeah,
exactly. Justina Lee, thank you so much. Here in the U.S., after 3 days of gains, we are seeing oil off its peak, but not by much, right? There hasn't been much movement, if any, in Kharg Island for the last few days, according to satellite imagery, and that's going to have an impact on the oil market as well. Brent crude above 107 still. New York crude still very close to 102 a barrel. Now, I wanted to talk about yields because we have that 30-year Treasury at 502.42, so that's the highest it's been in decades, basically. We have the 2-year yield very close to 4% now, and the 10-year yield creeping ever closer to that 4.5 mark. So it's quite a precarious position for the incoming Fed chair, who's likely to get his vote done today to make him Fed chair. Dollar index continues to strengthen, and we have futures bouncing back after the Nasdaq dropped about 0.9% yesterday. All right, let's get to some individual movers now. Here's Chloe Melly. Chloe.
Good morning, Bonnie. Some Magnificent Seven stocks are up this morning after the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, joined Trump on his visit to China. And so this was a last-minute addition to the trip, and it shows and means that AI is going to be really top of mind in this really high-stakes summit. And so we are seeing NVIDIA in particular up this morning about 2%, and also driving up the rest of that sector, with Alphabet and Amazon also in the green this morning. Moving on to Zebra Tech, which is also in the green this morning after the maker of things like computers, printers and barcode scanners was upgraded to an overweight rating by KeyBank following very strong results. And the analysts have said that this points to early signs of recovery in industrial demand, and said that challenges like higher memory prices were actually already priced in for that company. And so we're up about 2%. And finally, the recruitment firm Adecco over here in Europe is down after margin missed estimates, pointing to a lot of pressure on that recruitment sector because of layoffs, because of AI displacement. And we are down very significantly this morning, about 13% for that recruitment company.
All right, Chloe, thank you so much. Chloe Melly there in London. And coming up on this hour, we're going to have more on inflationary risks with Cayla Seder of State Street. But first, President Trump heading to Beijing for his meeting with President Xi.
I'm going to go see President Xi in 2 weeks. Actually, it'll be a very important trip. We're doing a lot of business with China and making a lot of money. We're making a lot of money. It's different than it used to be. In all fairness, he gets like 60% of his oil from Hormuz, and I think he's been very respectful. We haven't been challenged by China. They don't challenge us. We're going to have a meeting with President Xi. It's going to be, I think, quite amazing. He's been a friend of mine. I've gotten along with him very well over the years.
Joining us now from Beijing is Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Horner. Anne-Marie, the president almost in China. What should we expect from these meetings?
That's right. The president is just a few hours away from touching down here in Beijing. What I find very interesting being on the ground just in the past 24 hours that you wouldn't actually know the president of the United States was touching down. On the front cover of the China Daily this morning, it was actually about China's relationship with Tajikistan. And normally, as in 2017, you saw American flags and Chinese flags side by side outside Tiananmen Square. That is not here right now. So far, a muted reception we are seeing in Beijing. Maybe things change overnight. What you can expect is a lot of focus on deals, especially when it comes to trade, and especially given the fact that you can look at who the president is going to be flanked with in terms of the executives, maybe also some negotiations when it comes to the technology sector. We did hear from officials before the trip talking about the fact that they would like to open up a channel of communication when it comes to AI. Everyone obviously is focused and a lot of attention on the last-minute addition in Alaska, Vonnie, with Jensen Huang of NVIDIA joining the trip last minute, potentially when it comes to these chips. Remember the H-20 the United States lifted the ban on in January, but we've heard from the Commerce Secretary last month at a Senate hearing saying that not a single H-200 chip has been sent to China just yet because the Chinese government hasn't allowed those firms to purchase them. So I would say keep an eye on any sort of trade deal, purchase agreements when it comes to things like the agricultural sector. Obviously, Boeing is prepared to make a massive deal here, a record order potentially when it comes from China, but also how the communication surrounding technology, especially given Jensen Huang's last-minute addition. And then one notable thing, of course, is going to be the geopolitics and the context surrounding this trip. Obviously, the war in Iran. Remember, this trip was supposed to be in March. It was pushed back because the United States is engulfed right now with what is going on in the Middle East. And of course, for China, they're going to push the administration on any sort of language. And of course, the record arms deal they announced in December in terms of arms to Taiwan. And there's a $14 billion deal as well, Vonnie, waiting in the wings in the docket.
All right, Anne-Marie, thank you so much. Can't wait to see the outcome of what's expected to be a 3-hour meeting. That's Anne-Marie Horner in there in Beijing. In Iran, a liquefied petroleum gas carrier which had previously ferried Iranian cargoes sails past the blockade boundary, and data show it's now headed southeast in the Arabian Sea. Joining us now from Dubai is Bloomberg's Abir Abu Omar. It's an Iran-linked tanker. Abir, what can we say about traffic in the Strait of Hormuz? We have seen 1 or 2 tankers move through, after all, over the last few weeks.
Yeah, good morning, Vonnie. So you're right. You just mentioned this ship that was linked to Iranian cargoes previously. It is trying to cross the Strait of Hormuz. This is according to shipping data that we have seen this morning. And it's actually gone through the boundary that was put by the U.S. Navy last month. So, you know, the Strait of Hormuz is going through a double blockade at this point, one by Iran, one by the United States. So this ship is making its way through. It is a ship called Tara Gas, and it's carrying a very, very big shipment of gas making its way through the Strait of Hormuz. But it's not the only one, right? We have data to suggest that another tanker, super tanker linked to China, is also trying to make its way through the Strait of Hormuz, suggesting that it's linked to Beijing. Now, this tanker is close to Iran's Larak Island this morning, and it would be the third super tanker to try to make its way through the Strait of Hormuz since the start of this war. So look, again, the Strait of Hormuz is seeing a fraction of the ships that would typically have gone through it pre-war. We're now coming to a near standstill in the number of tankers and ships that are carrying cargoes through the waterway. But some progress there, especially ahead of this meeting between President Trump and Xi Jinping that Anne-Marie was just talking about in China.
Khark Island, we're not seeing any activity around Khark Island for the last several days. According to satellite data, it had been a hub of Iranian oil activity. Abir, what is that signaling to us?
Yeah, so look, I mean, the Kharg Island is the main exporting venue for Iran, and satellite images that were seen and witnessed by our colleagues suggest that the exports out of there have come to a standstill over the past few weeks. Now, remember, President Trump and the U.S. has been trying to exert this economic pressure on Iran to not have them export the lifeline that they have, which is those shipments. So that kind of pressure is coming to Iran. It is there, and that's what we've been seeing when it comes to the shipments that are coming out of Kharg. Now, Iran has been trying in its proposal or its response to the United States to unsanction, if you were, those oil shipments. That is something that the Trump administration has refused, and that is where we stand. You know, oil prices right now stand at about 107. North of that, they're pairing some of the losses that we saw earlier in the day. But again, at the heart of this issue remains the oil exports. It remains the Strait of Hormuz that continues to see this double blockade by both the U.S. and Iran.
Abir, thank you so much. Abir Abu Omar there in Dubai. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. JP Morgan is said to be planning an overhaul of the upper ranks of its investment bank. According to the Financial Times, investment banking coverage chief Dorothy Blessing, global head of capital markets Kevin Foley, and global co-head of the financial institutions group Jared Kay will all be appointed as co-heads of global investment banking. The reshuffle set to be announced today. French unemployment unexpectedly rose to its highest in 5 years. The jobless rate hit 8.1% in the first quarter. Joblessness increased across all age categories. Aramco is considering raising more than $10 billion from its real estate assets. According to sources, the deal would be a sale and leaseback transaction, allowing it to unlock capital while retaining use of its real estate holdings. Coming up, tech bouncing as dip buyers flock in. SoftBank's latest profit jump adding fuel to the return to risk. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Vonnie Quinn in New York. SoftBank's bet on OpenAI paying off. The Japanese conglomerate blowing past quarterly profit estimates, bringing in a net income of more than $11 billion thanks to its valuation gains on its OpenAI investment. Analysts had predicted $1.87 billion. Bloomberg's Neale Camping joins us now. So, Neale, a great quarter for SoftBank, but is it too reliant on OpenAI at a time when we're seeing fierce competition from Anthropic and even Alphabet?
We are seeing fierce competition, as you mentioned, Vonnie. Clearly, the entire upside surprise in that quarterly print was that OpenAI mark-to-market profit that SoftBank put out this morning. I think what it will do, though, is embolden perhaps or give them more justification and confidence in perhaps plowing even more money into OpenAI and potentially other AI-based models as well. So they obviously invested early into the race for the AI trades. But whether they can, other parts of the business aren't performing as well. And clearly we are in a market where with talks about various platforms trying to raise money in this space, it's very much still a race to see who becomes the big AI champions. And it's not clear whether SoftBank will necessarily be able to follow up a repeat performance as to what it's produced this morning in those results. Yeah,
it's interesting though, Masayoshi Son always pulling a rabbit out of the hat. Now, when it comes to Anthropic, it's in talks apparently to raise $30 billion at a $900 billion valuation. Can it make the trillion, Neale?
I think it's more a question of when it makes the $1 trillion valuation, because this is the third raise in terms of the number talked about in terms of valuation, and it's more than doubled in the last 3 months. Anthropic clearly, I think, has captured the attention of many of the agentic AI tool sets and the many leading hyperscaler investing in Anthropic as well. So it seems to be the hot topic currently at the moment. And we heard earlier this year about sort of the revenue growth rates that they've enjoyed are just simply staggering. Now, interesting actually is Anthropic's valuation today. We've got two big Chinese tech stocks Tencent and Alibaba reporting results this morning, that the market cap of those two Chinese champions is less combined than Anthropic's is today talked about. So that's quite tells you the feat of Anthropic's perceived growth and valuation over a very, very quick period of time.
Yeah, that is quite the setting in context for us. Samsung, it was about to be involved in labour talks. There were going to be strikes and so on. Then South Korea said it's getting involved. Bring us up to speed on what this might mean for the global memory chip shortage that we're already crazily worried about.
Yep, we are indeed, and this chip shortage is particularly sort of being seen in the memory space, as you mentioned. These HBM4 chips, the HBM4 chips go into these big AI models. Now, the problem here is that if we do see a strike at Samsung's fabrication plants, that could create some huge pressure on those supply chains, because whenever these fabs go offline, they can take weeks, if not months, to come back up to full capacity. So when you're already facing a memory crunch, you're already facing pricing squeezing going on today, and that's just on the supply side, and we already have a huge demand for these chipsets as well. So this could be another problem that supply chain faces, and just adds to the inflationary pressures within the AI ecosystem.
Absolutely, Neale. Thank you so much. That is Bloomberg's Neale Campling. Coming up, we're going to bring you part of our interview with Irish Minister of State Neale Richmond. That's next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Vonnie Quinn in New York. President Trump's trip to China bringing trade back into focus. This as the president's threat of higher tariffs on auto exports looms over Europe. I caught up with Ireland's Minister of State for Diaspora and International Development, Neale Richmond, on the EU's economic partnership with the US.
We very much want to protect this trading relationship. We appreciate the change in direction from the current administration. It's not necessarily a direction we'd like to go in, but we are responding in a manner that shows that we still have very strong trading potential with the United States. For Ireland within the EU, we recognise that the United States is our largest trading partner, both in goods and services, and we want to build upon that. And we're happy to respond to the United States and make sure an agreement can be reached.
What new progress is there, though, on ratification? How confident are you that there will actually be ratification in time?
Well, certainly this has gone through official channels within the European Commission, and it's been with the European Parliament. We are more than happy to ratify this on a basis which shows mutual benefits to both sides. It's not an ideal situation, but I have no doubt that what can be concluded by July of this year will absolutely be something that is of benefit to both sides.
The President has made clear that he's not averse to upping tariffs again if he feels like it, right? If he feels like the EU isn't meeting him halfway. How confident are you that pharma will be capped at 15%? Because it would particularly impact Ireland, the headquarters of Eli Lilly and other pharma companies.
Well, tariffs aren't a good thing, to be quite honest. They're not a good thing for the United States economy, certainly not for the United States consumer. However, we understand what the President has decided to make a decision. From an Irish point of view, we are confident that the cap that there is in place at the moment will stay. It is not just vital for our own economy. 10 of the world's 10 largest life sciences companies have a large presence in Ireland. It is our largest area that we export to the United States across medtech and pharmaceuticals, all the brand names that you know. But crucially, there are patients and medical practitioners in the United States who depend on both the drugs and the drugs components, as well as the technology that come from Ireland into the US market. We don't want to see anything happen that would make it even more expensive for them than it already is. And that's why we're happy to work with the United States administration to make sure that the life sciences more broadly, but particularly pharma, is a trading area that is one that is of mutual benefit.
How do you do that? Can you do it in a unilateral way, or do you have to go through Europe? How are you making sure that the US is happy with the situation?
We work within the European Union family to make sure that we can push things along, recognising that the trading relationship more broadly, but specifically on life sciences with the United States, is so important. But also, we negotiate directly, we engage directly, be it with the US administration, be it with the companies who have large presences in Ireland, be it with their representative bodies, be it with the political and business leaders across the United States who have an interest in making sure we protect that relationship.
What are the multinationals saying to you about their fears, be it uncertainty over tariffs, pharma tariffs, or just uncertainty in the Middle East?
Well, the uncertainty in the Middle East is having a massive impact on the European economy more broadly. But when we engage with the multinationals, particularly in the life sciences sector, we work on the areas that they need us to work on domestically. So that's looking at the large-scale infrastructure development in Ireland, new water infrastructure, new roads, the development of schools, the sort of things that make it easier for them to do business.
That was Irish Minister of State for Diaspora and International Development, Neale Richmond. Time now for your front page news. First, on the New York Times, US intelligence shows Iran retains substantial missile capabilities. The Times says secret new assessments say Iran has operational access to 30 of its 33 missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz. Next up, the Wall Street Journal highlights Joe Lowe, the fugitive behind the 1MDB scandal, asking President Trump for a pardon. The Journal says the request was filed in recent weeks and, if granted, would remove U.S. criminal charges from the Malaysian financier, who prosecutors say engineered the heist of billions of dollars from the Malaysian government-owned investment vehicle. And finally, the BBC spotlighting the King's speech. King Charles III will unveil the government's agenda in the UK for the year. It's expected to include more than 35 bills and draft bills on immigration, the NHS, police reforms. The state opening of Parliament taking place, though, as Prime Minister Keir Starmer fights for his political life. Coming up, we're going to push ahead to PPI data with Cayla Seder of State Street. That's next. This is Bloomberg. It's 5:30 a.m. in New York City, 10:30 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. Treasuries on the move after hotter than expected CPI data drive yields higher across major markets. PPI up next. Techs also bouncing today, lifting stocks. SoftBank's AI bet paying off handsomely, and Anthropic is chasing more funding. And President Trump landing in China in a few hours, emphasizing his focus on trade with President Xi while renewing threats toward Iran. Let's take a look at those markets then. We've had 3 days of gains for oil. It is off its recent highs, but only barely. We're above 107 on Brent still and above 101 on WTI. If you look at those yields as well, we're very close to multi-decade highs around the world. The 30-year yield in the United States is well above 5% and 502.42, and that's the same across the curve. We've seen markets start to price in the very real prospect of a hike at this point this year. Let's take a look at equity index futures, because of course we saw semis off the boil yesterday and then come back to end the session down just 3% when they were down 7% at one point. That plus the idea that Nvidia's Jensen Huang is now going to China, potentially lifting sentiment for the Nasdaq today. S&P futures also pointed higher, and that dollar index continuing to gain. Let's get to some individual movers now with Chloe Melly in London. Chloe.
Good morning, Vonnie. Shares in chip makers, optical firms and storage firms are all rallying this morning as we are seeing the global supply crunch in memory chip continuing to deepen. And of course, those chips being a very important part of the AI build-out. Those companies are also reacting to the CEO of Nvidia, Jensen Huang, joining Trump on his visit to China. And so we are seeing Nvidia, but also some of those other names, including Intel and Qualcomm, all in the green this morning. Moving on, but staying within the tech sector, and the semiconductor company Arteris is up this morning after first quarter results beat estimates, and it also raised its guidance because of very strong AI-driven demand. And finally, let's go over in Switzerland, where Adecco is having quite a tough time with shares hitting the lowest since 1993 because margin missed estimates. This really points to concerns around the recruitment sector, given all the layoffs that we've seen and those fears around the AI displacement and replacement of workers. And so we are down very significantly, about 12% for their recruitment firms this morning.
Chloe, thank you so much. Chloe Melly there in London. The latest PPI data dropping in less than 3 hours after that hotter than expected CPI report. Let's bring in Michael McKee for more. Michael, Paul Donovan pointing out today about the fictitious nature of some of what's in this report. Is it of economic concern that we saw a hotter print yesterday, or is it just more a political concern right now?
It's both. It's a concern for the Fed in that it keeps them on hold for much longer because at 3.8%, the new chair isn't going to be able to convince anybody to cut rates on the open market committee. And the markets probably aren't going to like it if they tried to do that because there's some inflation out there. And we're going to get more today. The PPI, producers' prices, expected to rise to 4.8%. That would be the highest since 2022. And it's going the wrong direction. And when you look at unemployment, there is no problem at this point with unemployment. It's near record lows. So for the folks at the Fed and for the folks on Wall Street, inflation is an issue. We saw goods prices were flat in the CPI, which you would have thought might have been higher because of tariffs, but we did see service prices rising by 0.5%, and that's where the Fed's been concerned.
Michael, we're obviously getting the Warsh Fed Chair confirmation vote today. If that all goes according to plan and Warsh is indeed the next chair, what would have to happen for him to raise rates before the midterms or to actually even talk about it with the committee?
You'd probably need to see a big drop in a big rise, rather, in unemployment to signal that the economy itself is in trouble. Tomorrow we get retail sales figures for the month of April, and they're expected to be relatively strong. They're not deflated by inflation, so they come in a little stronger than they actually were in terms of people's purchasing power. But there's no sign yet that the economy is giving in to the higher prices that we've seen. That would take a few more months. But as long as inflation continues to rise and move away from the 2% target of the Fed, you're not going to see any kind of move to cut rates.
What is everyone in Washington saying, Michael, if indeed the confirmation vote goes fine and he's the next Fed chair? Will he come under pressure from the president to lower rates?
Well, if it were an ordinary administration, you'd think not, because it's pretty obvious that they can't cut rates right now. But this is the Trump administration, and Donald Trump has his opinions. So there is widespread expectation that he will at some point send out a tweet criticizing the Fed, criticizing Kevin Warsh. How long he waits is going to be an interesting question because the pressure will ramp up as they get closer to the midterms.
Michael, thank you so much. Bloomberg's Michael McKee there for us on all the economic data and, of course, the Kevin Warsh vote. Joining us now is Cayla Seder, macro multi-asset strategist for State Street. Cayla, are markets pricing in the current state of affairs? If you look at treasuries and the 30-year yield at 5.02, what is that telling you?
I think it depends on where you look at the curve. So sticking to the long end, we do see yields being particularly high. And especially, let's talk about the 10-year yield. The 10-year yield is, higher than it was during peak Iran concern. And so we are seeing the long end be more sensitive. And there are a lot of drivers for this. So for example, we can think of term premiums, which have room to move higher. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. And what's interesting is that when we look at our investor data at State Street, what we see is that institutional investors, their appetite for duration is very, very limited. And so what that means is we would expect to see long end yields remain higher. The next question, though, is at what point does this hurt the economy? At what point, do some of these borrowing costs limit risk appetite? And so those are some of the questions we're grappling with right now.
That and also just inflation expectations, Cayla. If consumers feel like inflation is on the way, they're going to start hunkering down a little bit, no?
I think that's fair. Inflation expectations are so important for the Fed right now. The Fed has been out of mandate and on their inflation side for years and years. And so they really need to focus on inflation expectations. And we hear this in Fed speak, where the Fed has been able to cut when inflation is not at 2% because inflation expectations remain anchored. And now they still maintain that long-run inflation expectations are anchored. However, we have started to see consumer expectations tick higher. Now, what we've seen in actual consumer activity, hasn't really reversed. We've seen very strong retail sales. We'll get another read on that tomorrow. And we still see consumers being able to spend. And part of that does reflect a very strong labor market. So when you pair that together with where inflation is today, where some of the leading indicators are, I think it is fair that the market is starting to look at hikes either in 2027. When we look at December 2026, about 9 basis points are priced in. And I think that's fair that the market is starting to question, will the next move actually be a hike?
Cayla, you point out that in the equity markets, turbulence is high, but it's not getting worse. Are you confident that it won't get worse and that this volatility is about as much as we'll see?
I think it depends on where we're allocated and where we're looking within the equity market. Certainly with yields where they are and the propensity for long end yields to go higher, it will be very hard for the equity rally to broaden out. So that does put some pressure on really how far this equity move can run. With that said, when we look at downside risk, when I think about how much lower the equity market could move and what's really at risk here, I think about how are investors allocated. Are they sitting within sectors that are interest rate insensitive? And so far, the answer looks to be yes. When we look at allocation, we do see a lot of exposure to tech, to communications, to the US. And these are countries and sectors that have proven relatively interest rate insensitive. Now, that sensitivity may have increased over the past year or two, but when we think about it relatively to other sectors, we've seen these large tech companies be able to outperform even when the Fed is increasing interest rates. And so that gives me a little bit of comfort in that even if we do hit some bumps moving forward, overall allocation is secure for now. And that should limit some of the downside risk.
At State Street doing with the AI trade at the moment, are you sticking with the traditional AI trades, or are you trying to think a little further down the road when we might be fully valued here in certain areas? All right, I think we have lost Cayla Seder of State Street, but wise words there from Cayla. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. SoftBank's quarterly profits surging. Results were driven by valuation gains on its OpenAI investment. SoftBank has committed to raising its total investment in OpenAI to $64.6 billion by the end of the year. Anthropic is said to be in early talks to raise at least $30 billion in fresh financing. This sets the stage for its largest funding round ever. According to sources, the new capital will be raised at a valuation of more than $900 billion. The round is expected to close as soon as the end of this month. JP Morgan is said to be planning an overhaul of the upper ranks of its investment bank. According to the Financial Times, investment banking coverage chief Dorothy Blessing, global head of capital markets Kevin Foley, and global co-head of the financial institutions group Jared Kay will all be appointed as co-heads of global investment banking. The reshuffle is set to be announced today. Coming up, President Trump expected to land in Beijing in the next couple of hours. More on the US-China summit next. This is Bloomberg.
I'm going to go see President Xi in 2 weeks. Actually, it'll be a very important trip. We're doing a lot of business with China and making a lot of money. We're making a lot of money. It's different than it used to be. In all fairness, he gets like 60% of his oil from hormones, and I think he's been very respectful. We haven't been challenged by China. They don't challenge us. We're going to have a meeting with President Xi. It's going to be, I think, quite amazing. He's been a friend of mine. I've gotten along with him very well over the years.
President Trump due to land in China later this morning for a meeting with President Xi. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Horner joins us now from Beijing. What should we be looking out for as quote-unquote deliverables from this meeting, Anne-Marie?
Well, good morning, Vani. I mean, there's a number of deliverables in terms of what we could expect from this meeting between President Trump and Xi Jinping. Really a historic summit, given the fact that the last president to visit China was Trump himself in his first term nearly 9 years ago in 2017. I would say what we really want to focus on are things like purchasing agreements when it comes to agricultural sector, potentially a big Boeing deal as well that will be on the table. Obviously, technology is going to be in focus. The president right now that was on Air Force One with Elon Musk, an individual that has a huge stake in this company and obviously is looking for regulatory approval at some point later this year from the Chinese when it comes to autonomous driving. And a last-minute addition of Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. Of course, NVIDIA has really been this company that not only has been influencing the White House when it comes to chip policy, but has really been stuck in the middle between Beijing and Washington when it comes to at what level of advanced technology chips China can get their hands on. And what we saw earlier this year is the U.S. grant China's ability to buy H-200s. That was a U-turn from this administration. But what we know so far from the Commerce Secretary is that China hasn't allowed any Chinese firms to actually buy them. So are chips going to be on the table? And then, of course, the two big geopolitical issues to watch out for is, of course, the Iran war. Remember, this meeting was supposed to happen in March. It was pushed back given the war in Iran. China is the biggest purchaser of Iranian crude oil and also recently told their firms to basically ignore and snub U.S. sanctions when it comes to Iranian oil. And then the biggest tell and the biggest thing to watch out for on this trip, of course, is going to be how the president speaks about Taiwan. Lots of consternation in Washington, D.C., with the president saying that he would discuss the arms sale package right now that's in the docket when it comes to Taiwan. That's got a lot of China hawks and Republicans in Congress as well concerned about what the conversation is going to be. We know China is always going to press the United States on language and arms sales when it comes to Taiwan. But really, how does the president talk about this delicate issue coming out of the meeting is going to be one to watch.
Anne-Marie, we know that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and He Lifeng had pre-meetings in Seoul before this. Will they have sort of laid out the agenda, you think?
Well, I think this was incredibly important, especially given the fact that China likes this stuff to be done well in advance, not the evening before the summit, before the two presidents are set to meet. So Secretary Bessent and He Lifeng spent about 3 hours together in Seoul. According to the Chinese readout from CCTV, they said that was candid conversations. Likely on this agenda was some of the deliverables we can see between President Trump and Xi Jinping, and also potentially some of the asks the United States may have China when it comes to things like the Iran war and Beijing's backing and purchasing of Iranian crude. I do find it very interesting that this comes on the heels the evening before the meeting, because this is very different to how China likes to schedule these events. Normally, these discussions would have months in advance, and a lot of them did, but they would be ironclad deliverables already done before the summit. And the summit would literally just be pomp and circumstance between the two leaders. Right now, there's a level of unpredictability when it comes to this meeting, and that certainly would have the Chinese on edge.
All right, Anne-Marie, thank you so much. Anne-Marie Horder in there in Beijing for us. Back in Washington, lawmakers pressing Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on the mounting costs of the war with Iran. Let's bring in Kate Ackley of Bloomberg Government in Washington. Take us through the highlights, if you like, of the hearing, Kate. Who came out on top in the end?
Well, right. We've had Secretary Pete Hegseth on the Hill this week, and lawmakers have been grilling him and other Pentagon officials about just the rising cost and the duration of this war with Iran. They're now saying, the Pentagon is now saying that it's more like $29 billion. And of course, this all ties into the Pentagon's really unprecedented request for $1.5 trillion spending request. Really big money that the Pentagon is seeking from appropriators on Capitol Hill. And in the midst of this, this war that doesn't seem to have an end in sight.
Kate, another thing that doesn't seem to be having any end in sight is just gas price hikes at the pump, right? Inflation really squeezing U.S. voters, and we're just a few months away now from midterms, and also food prices too. And you can see that in the president's efforts to lower beef prices, take off the fuel tax and so on. What can he do in the next few months to appease voters?
Well, this is top of mind for, this is sort of the bread and butter issues for American voters. And we are now within 6 months of the midterm elections. You see Democrats running in their House races, their Senate races on the kind of affordability issue. And the economic data out this week showed that inflation had spiked up, in large part because of this conflict in Iran, where the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, so oil and gas can't get through. And it's, elevated gas prices in a way that, is very noticeable for voters. And so that is clearly top of mind. The U.S. cost of living jumped 3.8% through April, the month, the year ending in April. And that's a level that we hadn't seen for a couple of years. So that puts that issue top of mind, not just for voters, but obviously for lawmakers. Every member of the House of Representatives is up for re-election this year. And, you mentioned that Trump had said he wants to suspend the gas tax. And it's gotten a really cool reception on Capitol Hill. It doesn't seem to have been something that lawmakers are, really jumping for joy about. So we'll see where that goes. It's about 18 cents, I think, something like that per gallon. So it's not a huge amount, but every bit would help is what Trump is arguing. And again, getting sort of a cool reception on Capitol Hill for that.
Yeah, and of course it would take away, funding from the National Highway Administration too if that were to happen. Kate, thank you so much. Bloomberg Government's Kate Ackley. Coming up, PPI on deck, also another Treasury auction. We'll have your day ahead. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. Now a look at what's ahead today. First up, another look at inflation with PPI data that drops at 8:30 New York time. Then we have $25 billion in a 30-year Treasury auction. That's happening this afternoon. And earnings, among others, from Cisco and StubHub after the market close. Let's take a look at some pre-market movers. Chip stocks rebounding today. Nvidia helping that sentiment really positive after we learned that Jensen Huang is in fact going to join President Trump on the trip to China. Alibaba down 2%. We had earnings this morning. The revenue missed estimates despite its monetization efforts in AI. And then Next Power, well, a nice jump of almost 12% for that stock. Full year revenue outlook boost there for that particular stock. Let's take a look at your macro picture. It's going to be an interesting day. We are seeing oil off its highs, but bear in mind it's been rising for 3 days and we're really off just more than 0.5%, so not that much of a move there in Brent crude, which is still above 107. We have sentiment improving again, particularly for the NASDAQ. Now, S&P futures are also higher, but we saw the semiconductors down at 7% at one point yesterday. They crawled right back up to just being down 3%, and it looks like sentiment might improve a little bit more once again today. And then I wanted to point out yields. So the 10-year yield is a little lower than where we started the morning, 446.10, still crawling towards the 450 mark. If you look at the 30-year yield, though, it's above 502, and the 2-year yield is approaching 4%. So they do bear watching today. All right, that is it for Bloomberg Brief. Surveillance continues the conversation. This is Bloomberg.